So, there's been a trend on YouTube and other online spaces from those who create content discussing video games where there's almost this fear-mongering or just blatant misinformation when it comes to the current state of the industry or how game design trends have evolved throughout the history of the medium. It's endlessly frustrating seeing videos with sensationalized thumbnails and titles concerning why games aren't fun anymore, or things were better when I was younger, new is bad, old is good, and how the comments will often be in full agreement with the content of the videos. There's this implicit trust placed in the person who created any given video that you've decided to watch, and I'm sure you've naturally begun to trust me as a reliable source of information simply because I sound like I know what I'm talking about. Of course, this dives deeper into the psychology behind implicitly trusting any type of authority figure just by virtue of having the status of authority, but that isn't the focus of this video. Mostly. Rather, I want us to be a response to this type of sensationalized content because of how that content can shape the narratives around games, developers, publishers, or the state of the industry. Seeing this content frequently, even if you don't choose to actively engage with it and listen to some dude bro talk about how games aren't fun anymore because he can't accept that he's gotten older and refuses to branch out and try games outside of the yearly AAA releases he's so comfortable with, it can still influence your perception around a given topic. And besides, even if you don't click on that kind of video, a lot of people do. Like, a lot. Like, a really large amount. Do you realize just how big of a number a million is? I know it's kind of diluted by so many creators and videos on this platform having millions of subscribers and views respectively, but a million is so much. A million is bigger than the population of some US states, even some countries, and people are so easily influenced by propaganda. You are not immune to propaganda. Anyways, yeah, discussions about the nature of online discourse aside, what the focus of this video actually is title screens in video games. So, the plan is for this video to be like pushing back against the negative, unfair, untrue, and even outright harmful narratives shown in online discussion of modern games, which, spoiler alert, this might get a little bit political, and I can't really do anything about that. A lot of the current discourse surrounding video games is based in conservatives throwing tantrums over nothing. I'm just a YouTuber, don't shoot the messenger. Often in discussions about how video games aren't good anymore, there's a small but vital part of the overall experience of a game that's claimed to be a victim of this supposed plague, the title screen. But I'm gonna go ahead and show my hand here with an actually. It's very, very difficult to make a bad title screen. And I've really struggled with finding examples of bad title screens to fit the narrative that title screens have somehow lost their magic and that most modern games have bad ones, if they even have one at all. Trust me, I did my research. You want proof? Title screens have existed for as long as arcade cabinets have existed, fittingly beginning with one of the first ever arcade machines, Galaxy Game. Riveting stuff, huh? Coincidentally, two different arcade machines based on the same game, which is one of the first video games ever made, known as Space War, were created around the same time in different parts of the United States, with the opposing arcade machine, Computer Space, being created by the future co-founders of Atari, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney. While Bushnell and Dabney went on to be wildly successful with Pong the following year and helped introduce video games to the consumer market, I don't consider Computer Space to have had the first ever title screen, primarily because it uses an archaic form of what would later be known as a demo screen, where player inputs are recorded and played back in engine in order to provide an example of gameplay to allure anyone passing by in an arcade. No, Galaxy Game, despite its failure as a product due to its exceedingly high manufacturing costs, not only has the first ever title screen to my knowledge, but the first ever main menu, with options. This is the first of its kind, and it uses the same formatting as games released in the modern day. Do you understand just how insane that is? Just how innovative this was for the industry? Video games are so fucking cool, man. I love video games. Anyways, Atari did get a win in this subject though, having examples of the first title screens on home consoles with many different games released on the 2600. As the video game industry evolved, title screens became a standard, almost a requirement. It's usually a subversion whenever a video game doesn't feature one. It's just a part of good game design. You gotta know what game you're playing, who made it, what year it came out in, and a little bit of a peek into what the game has to offer. The specifics and the common design trends have naturally changed over the years, but the core concept is the same. I should probably specify what that concept is. So, within the bounds of this video, a title screen encompasses any content that appears in a video game before the player presses any inputs. Once the player has pressed a button and progressed to a new screen, that's where the title screen ends. This, just the beginning. What you'll see upon launching a game before interacting with it. That's all. That's the title screen. And I'm considering the title screen to be the same thing as the start screen. I'm just using title screen as an umbrella term for both of them because they serve the same purpose and function the same way. Also, to clarify, I consider intro animations to be a part of the overall title screen since those autoplay upon starting a game without any player input. With just how much this specific definition of a title screen can encompass, it would help to look at some commonly used design trends. And would you believe I created categories to define these common design trends? How thoughtful. It's almost like I'm coming at this from a place of passion and attempting to communicate my point effectively with proper explanations of design concepts instead of relying solely on the pathos of my status as a fan of video games. You know, instead of just expecting you to blindly believe everything I have to say simply because I'm a voice in a video you put on in the background while you do other stuff. I know what you are. Anyways, standard title screens are the title screens you think of the moment you think of title screens. They've got everything you need: the name of the game, selections for starting a new game or continuing a previous save, an options menu if you're feeling really fancy, and then legal junk at the bottom in small font. Simple and easy. It has everything you could possibly want from a title screen. But what if there was more, huh? Would anyone care for some subcategories? The static title screens are those without anything fancy going on behind the selection menu. Just a still image with maybe the logo of the game or some pretty key art. A notable example of this would be the title screens for most FromSoft games, like the Dark Souls series or Bloodborne. Bloodborne's title screen is just the key art used for promo material and the game's box art, but it's still memorable and iconic regardless of how simple it is. Animated title screens are those that do have fancy stuff going on behind the selection menu. It can be some minimalistic splashes of life with small animated UI elements like Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, a simple looping animation like Omori, or a fully animated scene like Ratchet & Clank Going Commando or Banjo-Kazooie. Interactive title screens are fairly self-explanatory. They're title screens where you can interact with something that isn't just the user interface. It can be a cute tech demo like Mario said in Super Mario 64, or even a sneak peek of actual gameplay, like in Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World. Immersive title screens are a little bit harder to pin down since they have a lot of overlap with other subcategories, like interactive or evolving ones. They typically have a significant amount of effort put into them compared to other subcategories, where the focus of their design is on immersing the player within the game world from the moment they launch the game. Something like Play Dead's Inside, where the title screen naturally transitions into gameplay. Not to dismiss the effort and design prowess present in all of the title screens I've mentioned previously, of course, but there's a clear divide between the title screen of a game like Doom 2016 versus a game like Superhot or 500 Caliber Contracts. I feel the nature of these title screens speak for themselves. Remember when I mentioned evolving title screens like half a minute ago or something? These are the ones that change with the progress you've made through a game's story, like the obvious example of Spec Ops: The Line that every video on title screens will mention at least once. It's a requirement. Although, I much prefer using Hollow Knight as an example, where even though the title screen won't change on its own with your progress, you'll still unlock different variations of the title screen to signify you've completed different feats, like finishing different endings or doing a run on the permadeath difficulty. No longer within the realm of subcategories, there are also demo screens. Let's see what I said about them before. I don't consider Computer Space to have had the first ever title screen, primarily because it uses an archaic form of what would later be known as a demo screen, where player inputs are recorded and played back in engine in order to provide an example of gameplay to allure anyone passing by in an arcade. Wow, isn't she thoughtful? Demo screens are still most often used in arcade games, but they do also have a history within the speedrunning scene in its conception, since demo files for id Software games like Quake were small enough to be shared of the late 90s internet without much issue. And those demo files were often used to share replays of fast level completion times. That's a topic for a video I don't have much interest in making though, so go watch Summoning Salt or something, I don't know. And lastly, there are the title screens that aren't, as in, they don't exist. No title screen at all. Personally, my least favorite approach, but to each their own. It's a little difficult to find games that fit this and don't have any title screen at all, since I personally consider games that bundled their title screen together with their main menu to still have a title screen. Like Katana Zero, there's no initial screen for you to press an input to progress past. The logo is just above the main menu UI. But this technically isn't no title screen at all, since the title is, well, it's right there. The title screen and main menu are just one and the same. I guess a good example would be The Witness, as after the initial title screen where you start your save, any subsequent time you launch the game, you're immediately put back into the world. However, I personally hate using The Witness as an example because it's terrible. It's fucking garbage. This isn't even in the script. I just personally, I have this vendetta against The Witness, and specifically Jonathan Blow, that pretentious motherfucker. Just play that Soulja Boy clip.
And they ain't got no point to the game. You just walk around jumping on shit. Yeah. It look like that.
They're not seeing the most important thing.
This shit's stupid as hell, man.
So, all this rambling of defining the different types of title screens aside, who wants some more distinctions of the nuances of title screen design? Of course you do. Since the arcade, home, and handheld game markets all had different means of delivering the overall experience of playing a game, the game experience, if you will, game design philosophies would naturally differ. To put it more simply, arcade title screens are different in design from home console title screens, which are different in design from handheld title screens. While they would all often cover the same bases, you're far more likely to see a demo screen in an arcade than you would for a home or handheld release. However, as the lines have blurred between the home and handheld markets since the Switch and Steam Deck, there's little distinction between the two now, as most title screens nowadays use the design conventions of the home console market. I will admit, it is difficult pinning down the exact distinctions in design philosophies, as I imagine that would take an entire video dedicated on the topic to properly discuss it, but it's just a vibe, you know? It's a feeling. The title screens for handheld games are more likely to push you along to the game itself as quickly as possible, especially with older generations of handhelds from the Game Boy up to the Game Boy Advance. As the years went on though, the title screens for 3DS games seemed to take more traits from home console Nintendo games, to the point where the title screens for ports and remasters of home console games on the 3DS fit right in alongside those of native 3DS releases. And yes, I know there are other handheld consoles besides Nintendo's, but they're the easiest and most recognizable example for the sake of this video, not turning into a long tangent about the history of Neo Geo or Sega's attempts in the handheld market. Okay, finally, with all of this prefacing out of the way, I can get to the part of the video where your opinions are spoon-fed to you as I come up with examples of what makes a good title screen versus a bad one. Now, what I look for personally in title screen design is if it looks good, yeah, but more specifically, if there's something that stands out, be it a single element or the overall design, as well as how the overall design matches the tone or vibe of the game it accompanies. And to wrap this all back in with the cultural war bullshit stuff, I'm providing examples from both older and newer games to help prove my point that so many of the narratives you're exposed to online are all bullshit. Starting off strong with easily one of my all-time favorites, 1994's Super Metroid begins with reminding us exactly what year this game came out and who published it, as shots of dead scientists lying on the floor are panned over, with the distinct cries of the titular alien lifeform cutting into the ominous, slow-building synths. It's dark, brooding, ominous. It instantly inspires this feeling of unease and morbid curiosity, wondering what could have possibly caused this disaster. Finally, it pans out to reveal at the center of this horrifying scene is a Metroid hatchling, and the game's logo fades in as the main theme plays. And then different bits of demo footage play showing Samus fighting space pirates and doing her silly space bounty hunter stuff, but that isn't where the focus is. This screen here, with the Metroid hatchling and containment and the game's logo above it, is easily one of the most iconic of its era, aided in no small part by the strength behind this game's interpretation of the series' main theme. Synths like this are commonplace in both sci-fi and horror media, especially, sci-fi horror, due to both the eerie and almost otherworldly quality of them being an inherently digital sound, as well as the way they seem to completely consume you. Stringed instruments are often the biggest drivers of emotion in music production, with the way that a violin melody can make you misty-eyed with how it can sound like it's crying out in pain, or listening to just the right piano or guitar melody could be enough to make tears stream down your face. Digital synths seem to capture the same quality as acoustic stringed instruments, with ambient hums, powerful strikes, droning chords, and all-consuming bass lines. For a lack of a better word, the quote-unquote vibe of synth production fits perfectly in a space horror setting like Metroid. It's just one of the thousands of different little things I adore about this franchise, and it does wonders with making this one of the best title screens of all time. So, I'll try not to let my bias show here, even though it will still be clearly evident, but, hot take, I don't like Ocarina of Time. However, I still respect it, in a sense. Even though I just couldn't get into the game in spite of my adoration for Majora's Mask, I cannot deny the power of this title screen. As the sun rises and the moon sinks, you're presented with these cinematic angles of Link on the back of Epona riding through Hyrule Field, as the title theme and logo fade in. It's this glimpse into the world of Hyrule that does wonders for establishing the tone and themes of this game, as the imagery of a lone adventurer on horseback is most often associated with feelings of isolation and freedom, coming of age and discovery of the self, finding out who you are through the hero's journey. A simple press start flashes slowly near the bottom of the screen, inviting you to take control and become that wandering adventurer. Towards the end, though, the perspective falls off of Link and seems to get distracted by a cave in the distance, implying that although this world looks magical and warm and inviting, there's still darkness, something sinister lying in wait. It's honestly really beautiful. I can imagine if you're nostalgic for it, this intro resonates with some fragment of your soul, that part of you that refuses to grow up from the age you were when you first played it. Sadly, I didn't end up playing this game until I was 20, so I don't feel that connection to it, but I do with the opening sequence to a later entry in the Zelda series, The Wind Waker. There's not much I can say about it that I didn't already say about Ocarina of Time's title screen. It establishes the world and aesthetic and atmosphere wonderfully with cinematic shots of Outset Island. They're both brilliant title screens for all the same reasons. Oh man, what could I possibly say about the opening of Silent Hill that isn't already self-evident? Sure, it's just a collection of various FMV cutscenes from different moments in the game's story, but the visual style of early 3D CG, combined with the exceptional score from Silent Hill composer Akira Yamaoka, make this opening something so unique that's never been properly replicated since. The haunting shots of Cheryl in the fog, Lisa Garland begging Harry for help, Sybil passing Harry on the drive leading to Silent Hill, followed by a shot moments later of her bike abandoned on the side of the road, the final scene of Harry swerving off the road to avoid hitting Alessa. I love all of it. And then of course, after all of this, you have the title screen itself. Simple, but with font choice and sound design, it does all it needs to as a buffer between the opening FMV and the game itself. These three title screens are what I'm using as key examples for what I believe to be, because of course personal opinion will naturally determine what I present as objective truth, some of the best that older generations of games have to offer. So, old is good, new is bad, right? No. Of course not. Have you been paying attention? Beginning with the iconic 20th Century Fox intro and a theme variation of the Sega logo, Alien Isolation's title screen does a phenomenal job at capturing the horror of the vast emptiness of space, with just a single shot of the Sevastopol station floating alone in a gas giant's orbit. Get it? The station is isolated in space? Anyways, yeah, I love this title screen. It's just the simplicity of it, not doing any more than it needs to, but still communicating so much with just visual storytelling. The shot composition is gorgeous as well, showing the station stuck between the harsh and unforgiving gaseous atmosphere of KG-348 and the suffocating, bleak nothingness of space. It's as if, in spite of how alone Amanda Ripley is as she's fighting for survival against an apex predator like a xenomorph, what's waiting for her outside of the station isn't much better. In space, no one can hear you scream, am I right? Okay, sorry, I'll stop. I've gone through countless roguelikes, with all kinds of different perspectives and art directions and takes on the same general formula, but none have managed to stick with me as much as Downwell. I think it's just the deceptive simplicity of it, with a risk and reward platforming combat gameplay style with airtight controls that feel next to none in the roguelike genre. It's one of those games that's just a pure joy to play in spite of its difficulty, with a skill ceiling that feels non-existent, as you're constantly improving and getting better combos and clear times as you make your way to the bottom of the well. So it's only fitting that its title screen matches its design philosophy of a modern refinement of retro simplicity, with the player character looking down into the well waiting for you to push them in. No menu, no options, just the character and the well before them. Or, if you don't want to fall down the well, you can explore a small area to the left, with a bench sitting beneath a large tree. This area serves no practical function, but this title screen wouldn't be the same without it. It's a moment of peace and reverie outside of the chaos within the depths of the well. As much as I want to dedicate this entire video to just this title screen alone, I'll have to try my best to refrain, as I'd rather give Omori the time it needs in a video of its own. I don't think there's a title screen I've stared at for longer than this one. It's so simple, just a portrait of Omori standing alone in white space with the bare essential menu options below him, as the title theme of a brief piano melody plays on loop. But within the context of the game, it means so much more than it lets on. What was once unsettling and ominous to me before my first playthrough became heartbreaking, soul-crushing, gut-wrenching, and it's nothing but the pale, emotionless face of the title character. There are variations to this title screen that trigger after specific events, but even showcasing them would spoil too much of what the game has to offer. You're better off seeing for yourself. I don't really need to say much when discussing the various title screens for the Destiny franchise. Every year since it launched, the title screen would change the logo and title theme to that of the most recent expansion, but my personal favorite has always, and will always, be the one I saw at 11 years old in 2014 when I played the game for the first time. When Destiny 1 was reaching end of life and Destiny 2 was nearing release in 2017, the title screen was reverted to the 2014 screen permanently. I can't really put into words just how much it means to me to see and hear the same opening I saw over a decade ago. The same one that made me fall in love with this franchise in the first place. Every time I boot the game up nowadays to comfort myself with the gorgeous landscapes of our vast galaxy. Sure, it's ultimately just a dumb MMO about space wizards shooting aliens with magic guns, but there's this quiet beauty whenever you ignore combat and just immerse yourself in this world. It was something I always wanted as a kid and still adore as an adult. Anyways, yeah. Title screen is really good. So now is supposed to be the part of the video where I stop waxing poetic about title screens and I have to be mean and rude and negative and talk about title screens that suck, but what if I didn't, actually? I don't want to anyways. I don't find it constructive for me to talk about this thing is bad and here's why, because that's not where my focus lies when it comes to interpreting art. I'm always the type to try to find the best in things. The best in people, the best in shitty situations, the best in the art and media I consume. I have so much love and passion for art in any medium, so it's honestly difficult for me to find things to complain about. Sure, I may not like something, but that doesn't mean I have to present my opinion of disliking something to a potential audience who may enjoy the same thing. There's nothing wrong with doing so, but that's just not me, you know? That's not what I'm here for. With all of my passionate ramblings of my favorite video games aside, why have we let ourselves be convinced of how much worse video games are nowadays by dudebro assholes who have no idea what they're talking about? Is it just because we implicitly believe in the authority status of every YouTuber or social media personality we come across purely by virtue of the number next to their name? We're so easily susceptible to the influence of those with large audiences supporting them, as there's a part of ourselves that's desperate to fit in and find a sense of community in everything. Nobody wants to be alone. Nobody wants to have a differing opinion that makes them stand out from the crowd. It's easier to parrot the opinions and beliefs of those with some semblance of authority than it is to formulate an opinion on your own, because then you won't have any risk of exclusion or having a quote-unquote bad take. Or does it stem from nostalgia from when games were better, with the fine print of, because I was a kid with nothing but free time and very little life experience, so every new thing was the most special thing ever? A desire to recapture that sense of wonder and naivety, and feeling so beaten down by adult life and responsibilities that you take out your frustration on what once provided you comfort, all because that comfort is different and not the same as it was before. An unwillingness to accept the difference, to accept change, so you double down and become jaded and cynical because you refuse to let yourself feel moved by the art you consume. What you engage with must serve the purpose of mindless entertainment to unwind after work, as you lack the energy to connect with art on a deep emotional level like you used to when you had the time. So instead you just replay old favorites from your childhood because they're the only things that make you feel anything anymore. Or is it from how burnt out we are as consumers with the current state of the industry, with huge names like Activision and Blizzard and Bungie and Take-Two and 2K and EA and Ubisoft and PlayStation and Xbox constantly having headlines of layoffs and workplace harassment and underpaid devs forced to crunch to meet deadlines defined by soulless husks and suits? So the magic that the games industry once had as a kid is now being beaten to death by shareholders, squeezing every penny out of an artistic medium to sell you season passes and overpriced cosmetics and expansions. You keep running the treadmill of the Battle Pass model, reaching a rank 100 and having your wildest dreams come true through a 3D model with a shiny texture, only to start back at zero with a 2 to 3 month timer looming over your head to do it again. All of this while playing the same game, over and over and over and over and over again. Because if you aren't always getting your weekly challenges done, you might not make enough XP to get rank 100 again, and you don't want to miss out, right? Or is it a result of simply getting burnt out on your hobby of playing video games because you lack other hobbies outside of it? Or blaming your burnout on external factors when it truthfully comes from within? A resistance to look deeper within yourself, to address issues plaguing your mind and your life that make it so nothing feels fun anymore. Like you're always running away from your problems instead of facing them head on, so you look for any excuse outside of yourself because you just cannot accept that there are things within you that influence your ability to feel anything anymore. Or is it just all of the above? I'd honestly argue it's more like a little bit of everything. Do you remember why you started playing video games? Do you remember the first game you played? The way it made you feel, the way the controller or handheld console or keyboard and mouse or arcade buttons felt in your hands? How it felt like a window had been opened in front of you that peered into a world you weren't supposed to see, and yet it was one so inviting and full of life? Why do you feel the need to be someone full of bitterness and disgust for something that used to bring you so much joy? Why do you feel the compulsion to follow along with the trends of online discussion telling you that games nowadays suck because they're woke or whatever, instead of looking critically at the current gaming landscape to understand how nothing has really changed over the past 50 years? Sure, trends change and popular design conventions adapt to shifts in hardware performance, but ultimately, video games are still focused on the core conceit of putting you into a world outside of your own, to which end is determined by the game you choose, which is something that I think plays a larger part in this jaded narrative than you'd think. The games we play dictate how much we perceive the wider gaming industry, so always playing the same annual releases with very little variation in their base gameplay will naturally bore you to death after enough time. You don't have to chase trends. You don't have to play what's most popular right now to fit in. You can play whatever you want. We're at a point in history where games preservation has become more important than ever, and publishers providing ways to play older releases on modern hardware, as well as emulation of course, makes it so much easier to explore gaming history than ever before. Play that indie game your friends have been raving about but nobody else seems to know of. Play that SNES or PS1 game you've heard great things about. Try to engage more with the retro gaming community. Find an old console being sold near you and install homebrew on it. Look for deals on indie games or modern re-releases of older games on digital storefronts. Use your PS5 to play a game that came out over 2 decades ago, or an indie game that could run on a ThinkPad from 2003. Who cares? As long as you're enjoying yourself engaging with an artistic medium in a meaningful way, that's all that matters. That's all I care about, at least. I care about putting an effort to engage with the art I love. And it's hard sometimes with how things are in the world currently because it often feels like so few people even care about anything anymore. But I do. I care too much. Even if I'm talking about something as dumb as title screens of video games, I care more than you could possibly imagine because it means everything to me. Everything I love means everything to me because I'm nothing without the love and passion I have for the things and people that matter most to me. What's the point in doing anything if you aren't passionate about it? What's the point in engaging with art if you don't have this burning flame within your chest that's kindled with every new meaningful work of art you fall in love with? So, I'm gonna ask you again. Why do you play video games?